to the FYD podcast. I'm here with Rick Earles and Melinda McNutt over at TeamNEO. I said both your names right?
Yep.
Correct? Yeah. So I was pretty confident, but I want to make sure. So I was going to take a deep introduction and letting you guys introduce yourself and just kind of tell me what you guys do on a daily basis and what is TeamNEO. Rick, you can start.
All right. I am part of the industry and innovation group at TeamNEO. I basically focus on two clusters. First one, of course, the primary one that I focus most on is the smart manufacturing cluster. And right now we're focused on IIoT, the implementation of IIoT, what's necessary to drive demand, and then focused on product innovation and all the resources that have to come together to support both functions. And then I also work on now the additive manufacturing cluster.
And additive manufacturing, does that include the smart or the 3D printing rather?
Yes,
okay,
3D
so,
printing.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay,
Right.
and I recently discovered that was a cluster.
That's
so,
right.
Okay. I
Walked in on that one.
Yeah, I walked into the wrong meeting once and I just stayed. And then Melinda?
Right, my fault, yeah. So Rick, is an engineer by trade, and I'm a business major, so came to TeamNEO about 2.5 years ago, but previously just worked in community development and fundraising, and then just wanted to get into economic development, so came to TeamNEO and moved to Cleveland and got involved in the innovation clusters that they have.
Yeah. So for everyone that doesn't know, which almost includes me still, even though I've been around the group for 3 years, what exactly is TeamNEO? What does it do? What are its objectives as an organization?
Sure. So we are an economic development firm. We're tasked with creating jobs for residents in Northeast Ohio. We have an 18-county footprint, so it includes Youngstown, Ashtabula, Canton, Akron, almost as far west as the Toledo area. It's 40% of the state's output, so it's a very important region for Ohio.
Yeah. And then, so do you guys look at what Columbus is doing in terms of that and then try to work with them, or you kind of view yourselves as competitors with them in terms of the job market?
I think that, with anything that we do, it's about playing off of your strengths.
Sure.
So a lot of the work that we do, before we start, we always take a look and say, well, what are the strengths of this region? What assets do we have? And we play off of those. I think every state in the U.S. has a strategy around, biohealth, and it's an important topic. But, we have the manufacturing base of, here, and so we focus on supporting that because it's one of our most important assets.
Yeah. So you guys have settled on manufacturing primarily.
It's one of them.
One of them.
One of the primary.
So what are the others?
Well, certainly there's energy, there's biomedical,
Yeah.
there's transportation.
Like logistics or transportation and
Transportation. So
Okay.
some of the biggest manufacturers of parts for aircraft, for automotive, they're all here in this region.
Okay.
So
out by the IX Center up there, or just a little bit everywhere?
they're everywhere.
Yeah, they're everywhere. Yeah,
a
I
lot
guess
of
that's
mom
fair.
and pop shops and machine shops that
Yeah, I guess I don't
support
think about that much. Yeah. So as far as the clusters that you have, to wrap my head around it, you're running 2 right now. I know you had the energy cluster, switching that up a little bit.
Right.
And I know I had John Paganini talking about a health cluster to me before, so I don't know if that's on the roadmap. So the objectives of each individual cluster are to bring people together, and then I guess brainstorm on how to get businesses hiring more people. Is that the end goal, or can you?
So it's just to bring all the businesses that have a like understanding and a like driver to be in that industry. So it's a secondary function what you do with that group, and so we're using it then to try to stimulate economic growth, both measured in terms of employment, and we want people to pay more taxes, so we can use that kind of stuff. So in this instance, when we talk about clusters, there are a number of different ways you can influence that process, but we're specifically focused on innovation to promote that and go further with that.
I think the very core of what we're doing here is accelerating the adoption of emerging technology.
Right.
And I think there's plenty of companies in this region that provide solutions, and there's plenty of companies that need those solutions. And so it's about bringing both parties together to help them find each other. And the companies that do need the solutions, educate them so that they're making the right purchase decisions, finding, the right solutions. I think you were at the meeting on Thursday about the 3D printing cluster, and the woman was saying how, this company wasted millions of dollars because they made the wrong machine purchase decision. And so, it's anything from, if it's 3D printing, maybe helping them find the right, make the right machine purchase, or if it's IoT, it's just helping them find the right systems integrator, etc.
And we're also trying to provide stimulus to make sure the resources are here to support both those functions. In terms of advanced training, and in fact finding all the different stakeholders that need to have, the background necessary to be able to support these kind of activities.
Sure, and obviously I wasn't part of the 3D cluster until maybe now, but the story just ends up, I thought I was going into an IoT event and everyone was talking about 3D printing, but prior to that, honestly, I've used 3D printers like in a fab lab with like just plastic, with the rivets and whatnot. Learning about all of the metal, 3D printers that everyone thought was old hat in terms of valves, or I forgot what everyone was complaining about, hearing too much about, whether it was it might have been a valve or some kind of tube, but everyone's like, oh, we've all heard about this because it was metal and 3D printed, and I'm like, I didn't know you could do that.
No, it was a everybody's been talking about the GE. The fuel nozzle.
Fuel nozzle, right? Yeah. But in my head, I'm like, I didn't even know metal 3D printing was quite there.
Yeah.
I've recently seen a video on LinkedIn about somebody 3D printing the worst piece of meat I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah, right, yep.
Right, but I didn't think that any of that was really in production, but I think from that meeting I learned that a lot more of that is in production than you would know.
Yes, right.
And I think with emerging technology, there's always the hype phase. And so I think what we're trying to do here in the cluster is, okay, let's get past the hype and then let's figure out where the applications are and, where it's real and where companies can utilize it. And that's a lot of the discovery that I think happens in the cluster.
Yeah. So what are, and I'll go into the IoT one next, but since I'm kind of on the 3D printing cluster, what are the main objectives that you guys are really getting out of there? Are you trying to match... I guess mirroring it to what I know, are you trying to match 3D printing solutions providers with people that need 3D printing, or some kind of... Actually,
we're trying to drive demand, so you really got to you have to start with the customers who are trying to put this in place, make sure that they have enough background to make decent decisions about where to apply it and how to apply it. Then you go out of your way to make sure that you have a supply chain now with very capable businesses that can supply those advanced concepts.
Yeah, I think there's we found three uses for 3D printing. There's prototyping, there's tooling, and then there's actual design in 3D. And so I think when we started our study in this region, we realized, okay, a lot of companies, they're using 3D printing for prototyping, but that's not the only thing you can use 3D printing for. So how do we help companies take it to the next level? And so one of the things that we did was we got some funding to be able to go out to companies and teach them how to use 3D printing for tooling. And that's an easy way to take your level of use to the next level, save some money, and it's a low, it's de-risking. We like to say that we're de-risking the technology adoption. The third phase is what we aspire to do is help companies figure out how to design in 3D. And so that's a level of skills training that we need to deploy in this region and figure out how to get engineers equipped with that type of knowledge so that we can, create the products of tomorrow and create, new, exciting, interesting things. But then as Rick was saying with supply chain, creating a part is only one piece of the puzzle. Then there's the post-processing phase. So I think one of the things we're going to start working on in the near future is finding companies that can get involved in the supply chain in terms of post-processing for 3D printing.
And I guess as far as you kind of went over the objectives, what challenges, or if any, are you really facing with getting 3D printing into a lot of the Northeastern Ohio manufacturers? Are there any real pushbacks or any hesitations towards it?
Well, again, and it's the same issues we have even with IIoT.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know what they don't know. And we're also finding out that, especially as we push the envelope for using 3D for product, more detail needs to be created with regards to materials and things like that. We did, you don't have to do a lot of searching around for materials if you're making tooling, but when you actually start putting them in a product, and those products are expected to function in environments, different environments, and long term, and be reliable, then there's a whole new set of parameters that have to be established.
Yeah, I think as economic developers, one of the things that we try to do is we try to get out and meet with companies on a yearly basis. So we have what we call a business retention and expansion calling program. So we physically are going out, meeting with companies, talking to them, trying to figure out their future plans for expansion, trying to understand their workforce needs. Yeah. And then that helps us then start the conversation around emerging technology. So if we go out to a manufacturer and we see that they haven't really been exploring this topic of technology adoption, then that's our opportunity to start having the conversation with them and helping them make decisions around where it applies and fits for them. So that's what we're focused on. And sometimes I think that being located in the Midwest, I think that we're slow to change. So again, the cluster is a safe environment to help de-risk the adoption and hopefully get companies to be more productive and more innovative by using these technologies.
Sure. And I guess to switch over from one topic that I know not as much about to a topic that I know a lot about, we're going to transition to the IoT cluster, which I am a part of, particularly your focus on IIoT as that stands, and that additional I is industrial, for Industrial Internet of Things. Which really just pins it down to IoT as it pertains to big manufacturing, or maybe even small manufacturing, but anyone that's really making anything. And I've been on a lot of projects with implementing sensors and devices to various manufacturers to make them more efficient, to streamline some processes, to kind of bring them to the next level of maybe even CNC machining, things like that. What are you seeing in the Midwest in terms of IoT adoption trends? Are you seeing people jump on board very readily? I'm not. So I guess that's kind of what I want to talk about. And why do you think people are hesitant then?
Well, there's a couple different issues. First of all, the best place to spend the money is at the small to medium sized enterprises. Again, you spend $1 with them, and they spend it on taking some legacy piece of equipment and instrumenting it, and maybe they have one or two of those. But they're also getting a fantastic impact from doing the analysis and improving business around that implementation. As opposed to if you gave that same money to a large organization, typically they're a little bit further up the spectrum of digital maturity. So they're going after advanced concepts like data analytics. So that money is not going to go as far. So we've already found that we want to go after that midstream. And in fact, if you look at the spread between the large organizations, large companies here, and those that are what we consider the small, medium enterprises, it's about 3% are the large, and the rest is all.
The rest is smaller.
All the small and the medium, and we have about 7,000 manufacturers in this region. So, again, if we focus on the small to medium sized businesses, help them come up this, start their journey up this maturity of digitalization, we'll go much further.
I think that when you compare 3D printing to IoT, I think there's more excitement around IoT. I talk about 3D printing, and I don't know if anyone cares, but IoT, that's exciting, and I think the response has been it's been overwhelming. There are companies that are interested in it. I think the difference is they just don't know how to get started. And there's definitely a difference between a large manufacturer and a small to medium size. They have different sets of problems that they're working through. And so, of course, the large manufacturers, they've been dabbling in this topic for a few years now. And, they have concerns around data and, we'll say analytics. And then maybe your small to mid-sized companies, it's something they know they need to do. They just, how do they find a project? Where do they start? How does this work? So,
I guess before I go on this tangent, how do you guys define a small, mid-sized company versus a big one? What are we have 3
I guess I guess you could say it three types of three ranges. So it's less than 50 that we call them really small, 50 to 200 million in sales, and then greater than 200 million.
Okay.
So the large guys are the greater than 200 million.
So you're looking at that 50 to 200 million dollar range.
Well, we're working with both.
Okay.
Large and smalls, but we're with the effect of going after, or at least training those smaller manufacturers. Again, those are the ones that really don't know what they don't know, and they're so busy making money at this point in time, they don't want to take the time off to the side and come up to speed on this unless they're forced into this by their customer or through competition. So at this point in time, they don't have a lot of motivation for coming up. They know it exists. They see that some of their competition is doing a little bit better than them, but at this point in time, just too busy with customer orders.
So they're too busy doing what they have to do. They don't have time to do what they need to do.
That's correct.
Kind of
That's correct.
What devices are you seeing implemented?
So that's interesting. So what's driving a lot of that is you'll find that most of these SMEs, small and medium enterprises, are focused on something called OEE.
Okay.
So overall equipment effectiveness.
Okay.
So and it's got a speed component, how fast the machine can go. It's got a quality component, and so you put all that stuff together. It at least allows you to do your first foray into applying IIoT. Would be improving the business efficiency, improving quality, improving throughput, maybe even doing some analytics, figure out where your pinch points are, where I maybe have to do a better job of workflow and things like that. A lot of that can come from that small implementation.
Sure.
And then the other issue there is to find, because the manufacturers in this area are older.
Okay.
They have a big population of legacy equipment that isn't instrumented currently. And then, of course, some of them are buying newer equipment. So it's the ability to take the legacy equipment, instrument it. Doesn't have to be that sophisticated. Just instrument it, pull some information from it, start feeding it in, and doing some analytics with it. And then, oh, by the way, they are buying machines. We find this quite a bit. They're buying machines that have the capability of talking to one another, but they don't put it in place.
They just don't turn on the features.
They don't turn on the features yet. So when they finally start pulling all this together, then they're able to do at least, it's sort of the jumping off point. They start their journey. They see how effective that is, and then they start applying some of the next applications like predictive maintenance and things like that. Get stuck on the side.
I guess so. You're in the IoT cluster. You're definitely connecting a lot of vendors to, I guess, buyers or people that need it desperately. I know the one company that comes to mind is Hitachi Futera with Dave Moon, who I've talked to a lot about storage. But a lot of his, it's interesting because he's kind of offering a traditional IT storage solution that's been modified for an IoT environment or for a manufacturing environment specifically. But a lot of the IoT is kind of the less exciting parts of IoT and more on that predictive maintenance. Not I guess that isn't exciting to me. I will go on record saying that. But it just isn't. You're basically saying, instead of telling me when a hard drive's failed, I want you to tell me when a hard drive's going to fail. Which is a major, selling point to any market and with any SAN. And it's definitely a flavor of what you can do with IoT. But as far as manufacturing goes, I would say that a lot of the adoption that I have seen has been along the lines of like, just tell me when it's going to break, or give me a better idea of when I need to upgrade, give me a better idea of when I need to change. But nobody's really looking at things from or at least not many people are looking at things from how do I mine my own data? Right. So I have all these machines running. I have all these, manufacturers running, but there's all this data that can be collected to speed up this process, and nobody's implementing anything to mine that. I think that kind of goes into more of an artificial intelligence discussion in terms of running some kind of AI to sort that data.
Yeah, well, there's also some apprehension
Okay.
because most of these SMEs are going through or already have gone through the implementation of the ERP system.
Sure.
And so there's the SAP syndrome.
Okay. like an Oracle SAP system, or
Well, so it costs twice as much as was originally told to you.
okay.
It took me 4 or 5 more people. I had to hire my own people to bring them on board to be able to implement it. And now when I want to update it myself, I've got to find a consultant, and he charged me $200,000 a year just to get him to come in. So a lot of these SMEs, if you look at the operations managers or even the owners, they have that in mind. I mean, you guys are you're going to force me to go down this road, and these are the kind of experiences I've heard everybody's had with trying to implement, again, a data-based system.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at that
and
point,
of course, it's not like that.
Right. They still have to
Right.
grow, right? They still have to make those changes.
And you brought Hitachi up. So there's a big trend between what they call CapEx and OpEx. So one of the other big issues that were pulling on the strings of the poor SMEs was they saw that they were going to have to install all this, this complete solution, complete system. So even though I had maybe I have my new machines. I still need to pull data off of that. I need to go back and instrument my legacy equipment. I got to pull that back into a router, a gateway, and then I got to put a pretty good size, historian in place, keep all the data. Then I got to ship it somewhere so they can do data analytics, and then it comes back to the floor, and then I can get it finally back to my worker. That sounds like a humongous cost. Capital equipment that's necessary to support that is out of this world. But now a lot of the suppliers like Hitachi are allowing you to do what they call make that conversion from CapEx to OpEx.
Moving to like a subscription model.
Like a subscription model, right. And that's pretty popular. It's starting to become very popular.
You're seeing people actually
yes.
actually buy into that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's kind of an interesting shift. I'm interested to see, I guess, what do you think the next 5 years for IoT look like in the Midwest?
So I'm sure it's going to, it's taking off more and more, especially as those types of programs are rolled out. We're really going after all the little issues that prevent an operations manager from making these kind of decisions, or at least address his fears, his or her fears. And so you'll see a lot of different organizations becoming aware of that and addressing all those different dimensions so that they can more easily sell their product and get it in.
I think that, next 5 years we have some, big challenges ahead of us. I mean, workforce obviously is one of them, but I think we talk about the ITOT divide.
Yes, right.
And how those need to become, more integrated internally, that they're not just separate departments, and that they're working together. Your operations manager has his own timeline, and the IT people, apparently they don't have the same priorities. So I think the more that
and think differently too.
Yeah. So the more that IoT is deployed internally, the greater, and demand there's going to be for them to work together. But then I think the cultural aspect of, how does the culture change inside the organization now that there's, these IoT components. I think there's fear over, am I going to lose my job, job loss. But my hope is that if we can eliminate those, low wage, low paying, mundane jobs and create those high paying, interesting, high tech jobs, I think that's what we need to do here. So.
Well, and I actually had this conversation at a Magnet meeting a couple months back where it was kind of along this line of conversation, a lot of AI as it pertains to the logistics trade and replacing a lot of the truck drivers. There's a fear that people that are in those lower skilled jobs won't want to grow into a more complicated role. Now, I obviously it depends on the individual. I think it also depends on what opportunities that individual has been given. I think that a lot of people that are working on the assembly line are probably there because they haven't been given an opportunity to do something else.
That's correct.
And I think that most people can exceed, beyond whatever,
Right.
Locally, Lincoln Electric does a great job in,
Yes.
training and really reinvesting in their own guys to give them better skills, different skills with their welding program and whatnot.
Very impressed with that organization.
Yeah, very much. But with that having been said, as far as you see those workers getting displaced, what do you see as far as re-education programs for them, aside from Lincoln Electric that does have a really good re-education program? I think that's a big challenge this region has as we start displacing people from their assembly line jobs or from their truck driving jobs. What do we have to help get them into some kind of different trade or some kind of education to that next level of career path if those are going to be more and more automated?
So there's a pretty good effort in that regard in this region. So we work very closely, for example, with LCCC, Lorraine Community College. They have specific curricula they're actually putting in place now for that to take place. And in fact, they've even got some capacity for earn and learn. So you can actually work for the organization while you're coming up to speed on the critical concepts that are necessary to take it to that next level of participation in the organization. So and they're not the only one. So in fact, we even seen Tri-C is doing the same thing. So there's a lot of organizations. In fact, they're even cooperating now with CASE and the IOTC organization. So they all see that as a necessary requirement. If we're going to, again, that's probably where those people that you're going to be putting, we talked about OT, the operation technology, that's probably where those people are going to come from. And then take on the greater roles, because most of those guys know how to program, for example, the machines that are in the back. They know about data exchange and all that, and how to get it out of the equipment, but they're not front office oriented. They're not really big data oriented. If you can take those guys, with a 2-year degree, and now that some of them actually allow you to transition to a 4-year degree, take them through that process. They're perfect for introducing them to the higher base concepts of AI and things like that, or big data, and they become just key to the future success of the organizations. And again, they're now able to even take on IT roles that would have normally not been part of their wheelhouse.
And Melinda, you mentioned workforce development issues as far as both IoT and 3D printing are concerned for the region. Is that really an issue in getting talent from elsewhere here, or growing the talent here, or a combination of both because we just don't have the people?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. There are, let's say 5 years ago, I don't know that, Youngstown State University or Youngstown had a single 3D printer, and then they, got into the industry, and now they can say that they're one of 3 universities in the nation that have all 7 3D printing processes. So they're, just within the last 5-6 years, really starting to turn out talent and develop their programs. They're bringing world-class professors to teach, and they're investing, I think, almost $10 million into a new center for smart manufacturing, which I think will break ground later this year. So I think that we've made a lot of progress in the last, I would say, 5-6 years. And the same with Case Western University. They have their internal lab. I want to call it, what do you remember?
I6?
No, their kind of incubator for students to...
Oh, ThinkBox?
The ThinkBox, yeah. Because that ThinkBox is newer and expanding and growing. And I think even just the universities in this region, I mean, they're growing every year. I think Cleveland State University just bought new 3D printers. They're growing and expanding. So I think we're making progress, and we're going to continue to do so. But I think in the short term, I think we are relying on bringing people from outside. So I know Parker Hannafin, their lead for 3D printing, he came from LA and the that area because they couldn't find the talent that they needed. And so that's like the short term fix. But at the same time, I know that we were there at the 3D printing cluster meeting, and Barb had said, Barb Ewing, the CEO of the Youngstown Business Incubator, said that when people are doing LinkedIn searches for jobs, they're actually including Youngstown in their search because they recognize it as a place for activity in 3D printing. So I think we are,
well on the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, workforce is kind of a tough thing in general because, coming from more of a cybersecurity background, there's always a place for you. You know, and it doesn't matter how bad of a person you are. if you're in cybersecurity, somebody will hire you. Yeah. And I don't imagine that's necessarily the same for 3D printing or for IoT, but I also don't see a whole lot of people running around saying, "Hi, I do IoT," right? Or I do data mining for IoT devices, or but maybe I'm not in the right groups, right? I didn't even really.
It's interesting you bring that up because we were helping a small company that basically does IoT related products.
Sure.
And they monitor equipment for bars and things like that. They make the equipment so you can install it.
What kind of bar?
For bars that serve alcohol.
Okay.
So
sure.
they go back and
bar.
Yeah. Well, and then they also do some material handling too. So they put these data packages together, or actually hardware packages and data, and they pull it back in, and they can make suggestions as to how to change your logistics, how you purchase, when to buy some stuff, how much to buy, also how to change the process of which you're dispensing it, because again, a lot of people are, if you've ever been to a bar and you see a lot of the foam coming off, sometimes it takes two glasses to get one out of it, so they can help you through that whole process. They had an intern working for them, and he was almost done. In fact, he was going to graduate, and they wanted to be able to hire him. Well, he went out to look for a job, and they were going to pay him $150,000 just to start. So he ended up going to this other company. Yeah. The startup, of course, couldn't afford that.
Right.
So again, if you've got some of this capability in your background, and you've got some experience that you can even demonstrate that you've actually been, helping customers, and you know how to interface with customers, you know how to also sell the concepts, then you're as good as gold.
Sure. Yeah. Interesting.
I think you'd be surprised. I think there already are job titles that include IoT in it, and I think it'll just continue to grow.
Yeah.
And are you guys seeing a lot of IoT implementations in healthcare right now, or are you guys not really dabbling too much in that?
I am still.
Okay.
We sort of put it on the back burner when it comes from TeamNEO at this point, because again, we want to focus on getting the implementation of IoT in place.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of activity taking place there, and in fact, there's a little issue with regards to what systems you actually want to even bring together, how to bring them together, because there's so many different protocols and software packages out there, and large organizations that make services and products for that don't necessarily integrate well.
Yeah.
So that's their biggest issue, is how you bring all. They've identified their needs, but what systems, what organizations, in fact, even a lot of the organizations they used to work for or work with to get these systems implemented, those configurations are completely changing. And so the business models are completely changing when it comes to products. So, Philips isn't doing the same thing it used to do. GE is certainly not doing the same thing it used to do. Any one of the other big guys who used to be, for example, in instrumentation and data management, even IBM, right, is not doing the same things it used to do.
Sure.
And they're starting to feel competition from smaller organizations, which is not that good either, because then they're stovepiping particular functions within the hospital, and at some point in time they've got to be integrated together, and those are big issues.
Okay. And do you think IoT is helping or hurting then?
IT can help if they can figure out how to pull it together. I mean, when you think about precision medicine, which everybody's going towards, it really is pulling that data together from all the different sources and doing a better analysis to do prescriptive healthcare now. And when you start doing that, but you have siloed all the data, and it's not synced, and it's coming from different sources, and it doesn't have the right protocols to pull it all together, and then you can't do it fast enough. then it doesn't make it's holding everybody back from realizing the true opportunity, for example, from precision medicine.
Right.
I will say, I don't know if TeamNEO will go down the path of smart healthcare just because we focus on the traded sectors and typically a hospital system isn't considered, traded sector. Now, if it's a medical device or, you're talking about precision medicine, maybe. I will say with the 3D printing cluster that we have, 3D printing in healthcare is an important topic for us. So we're actually currently forming a networking group just dedicated to people that are interested in 3D printing for healthcare. So that's coming up. But there's a lot of, I think at the moment, we're 3D printing medical devices, orthotics, orthopedics, even, we discovered hearing aids last Thursday.
Are mostly 3D printed,
yeah,
right?
I didn't know that. And even, dentures and, Invisalign. But I think there's a lot that still can be done around the materials development side. And so I think even, I don't know if a lot of people realize just the capabilities in this region when it comes to not only materials, but even flexible electronics. Right. What we had previous before the smart manufacturing cluster was a cluster for flexible electronics. But we kind of realized with, the emergence of IoT and just the base of manufacturers that we had here, there was a greater prize if we were to, kind of focus on smart manufacturing as opposed to flexible electronics. And so that's when we pivoted over to this topic.
Interesting.
Yeah. And the underlying theme for all of that, basically, even why the reason we went after flexible manufacturing was to go after embedded intelligence. In fact, we have a cluster called the ICE cluster. Well, we used to have an ICE cluster, but ICE is instruments, controls, and electronics. That's been around in this region for years, for almost 50 years now. I mean, the Baileys and all those guys that were here, ABBs and all that, for that matter, we still have the Eatons and Rockwells. They're all here already. And the basis of going after industrial control, the basis after going after biomedical was all embedded intelligence. And in fact, you look at your smartphone, that's why the transition took place there. Embedded intelligence, it does a whole bunch of more stuff. So we have the underpinnings of that in this region. It's a matter of just taking advantage of it and weaving it into the different initiatives that we now call, for example, IIoT or IoT, or for that matter, even precision medicine. Backbone of all the realization is from embedded
technologies,
embedded intelligence.
I will say what I do admire about Rick is just his supply chain knowledge, and I think that's something that we can offer companies when they come to us. Is we can, I think because when I say we, I mean Rick knows the supply chain so well. We're really able to help create partnerships, introduce companies to each other. So Rick is.
I get all sorts of help from you too.
Oh no, but
yeah.
Rick, where were you before TeamNEO? What was your background before that?
Oh my God! You want me to go through the whole thing?
Just like the Cliff Notes version.
Well, without saying how old you are, I just like to say Rick has a 30-year career in automation.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
So
you're 31.
Yeah, 31. That's right. No, prior to this, I was working for Battelle.
Okay.
But it was for an initiative called the Glenner Microsystems Initiative.
Was it based in Columbus?
No, actually, it was right outside the gates of NASA, because that's where we first started it, and so that was actually implementing the harsh environment sensors.
Okay.
So we basically had put together, and one of the first things I did when I got there was turn it into a not-for-profit business. Actually, turn it into one. Because it was an initiative, but we actually incorporated it at that point.
Yeah.
And so we had about 13 different projects on an annual basis that we had almost $40 million to play with, and we were putting it into, again, it was really, frankly, embedded intelligence. That's when you think about advanced sensors, where are they being used? And if you want to take full advantage of what they are, it's still, you embed some intelligence associated with them. And it was, again, for harsh environments. So that was again part of Battelle. Prior to that, I was an independent consultant. Yeah. Prior to that, I was working for. Who was I working for? Then I was working for Marshmallow Fram. Again, that's automation, instruments and controls.
Okay.
prior to that, I was working for Joslin High Voltage, and prior to that was, I think it was Vickers for a while, so that was on the fluid power side of things.
Okay.
And then prior to that, I was National Fluid Power, the director of the National Fluid Power Association.
Yeah.
So we were working on,
Yeah.
again, that's the primary focus there was embedded intelligence.
Sure.
Because that was what they called mechatronics. That was the way that trend started, where we were taking electronics, integrating into the fluid power products.
Yeah.
And then prior to that, I was working for Square D.
Okay. Yeah, I know them.
But ultimately, you ended up at Nortec, and Nortec was formerly, it was a think tank here in Cleveland,
Right.
and they were focused on, commercialization of technology and helping, tech companies here in this region. But about 3 or 4 years ago, it was folded into TeamNEO, and so TeamNEO traditionally had these functions around business attraction, and we talked about the retention and expansion, and then bringing over this component of technology. It was a new opportunity for us to figure out how can we use the adoption of technology as a mechanism for economic growth. And so that's when we started to formalize our clusters. And then you talked about do we compete with Columbus? Well, I will say that we're the only region in Ohio that can say that they have formalized innovation clusters.
I didn't know that. I just assumed everyone did. That's unique to
Well,
Cleveland.
I kind of don't like saying the word cluster because I don't really know if it's
how other people are using that word.
Well, but I don't. Is it a common term? Because I think clusters are well known in Europe. I feel like it's a European
Actually,
concept.
pretty big here in the States because the guy it really had its generation from the gentleman from MIT. I forgot his name. Everybody knows him, but it's been around in the economic development circles for a long time.
Yeah.
But when you actually walk up to a
engineer,
business, just say, "Hey, you're part of a cluster," they wouldn't know what you were talking about.
Have you been involved with any clusters? I know you said you lived in Boston.
I have.
So
That's why I assumed everyone just had them. Because when I was in Boston, we had cybersecurity clusters, we had IT clusters.
Yes, right.
And those did pool in a lot of our resources. I would say that from a business executive perspective, at least the clusters I was in, they weren't too fond of us being a part of them because it was basically used as a, hey, Red Rover over here to work over this job. So, I mean, everyone at the cluster would just get recruited by other people at the cluster constantly. So, my employer at the time was Cisco. So I actually, and I stayed with Cisco. I never went somewhere else, mostly because I'm undesirable. But, as far as that cluster went, I saw a lot of people just darting around, and there were some. Usually, the smaller guys were like, I don't want you going to this cluster and just getting recruited by, Oracle, or whoever else was there. But I would say that those clusters are very different than your cluster in and of that. The IT clusters that I was a part of were really, honestly, closer to what the meetups in Cleveland are for hackathons. It's just a bunch of people getting together and teaching each other, different skills, different things with what's going on in cybersecurity. There was a point where Python was really misunderstood, and that was something that people really I mean, probably every month somebody was trying to explain Python to somebody. It's different, right? Your cluster has an agenda. It's a lot more organized. Not that the other clusters weren't, but it's more streamlined, and the objective's very clear, right? You are a workforce development organization that's trying to help businesses grow within here, but also attract other businesses here by demonstrating the technical acumen of Northeastern Ohio.
Right.
And I will say we're organized because we started with what we call a roadmapping process. So in the summer of last year was when we kicked off this initiative, and it started with bringing together industry leaders. So we had leadership from Parker Hannifin, Rockwell, Amazon Web Services, and some of the mid-size, and then as well as Hitachi. So you got some solution providers and
academics.
We had the IoT collaborative, and so we had this steering committee of industry-led volunteers that we came together twice a month and met, And we identified where are we at now, where can we go, and then a part of the process was what we call the voice of customer. So we actually went out and we did interviews with almost 50 interviews of just company executives, just trying to understand where they're at right now in this process, and just understand what their needs are. And so when we talked about how there was differences between the large and the small guys, well, we didn't make that up. We got that because we did a lot of interviews to receive that feedback. And so we have is it 200-page document?
You could have been.
Rick,
no, it was 120, but that's because they shut me off.
Yeah, so Rick, was the lead in bringing together all of the data and information that we collected. We put it into a document that is available online. Anybody can access it, and it's a really great way to just see how is this region thinking and feeling about IoT. And it's our, it gives us direction as a region to really understand if we really want to push the needle or move the needle, really make some progress, then we need to follow the roadmap and actually implement the strategies that it laid out.
Yeah, it specifically describes 12 different initiatives. And a lot of them which we have talked about.
Yeah. What are the ones we haven't talked about?
Well, I think we should boil it down to the three main. It's workforce development, it's IoT adoption, and then it's product innovation. And that's so I think everything that we do, it revolves around those three core principles, and then underneath that, that's where there's sub initiatives, and that's where
like
you get the 12.
Putting the structure, improving the structure of the cluster to handle those.
Yeah. So one of the ways is we developed a IoT readiness assessment. It's just an online survey where you go on, you fill it out. If you're a manufacturer thinking about IoT, or you've already started the process, and when you complete the survey, it gives you a score. That way you know how you benchmark against the other manufacturers in the region, or at least the ones that took the assessment. So that's a great way to see what your readiness level is. So that was one way that IoT adoption. That's kind of the segue. Let's figure out where you're at on the spectrum. What's your readiness level? And then I think everything that we talk about, we say it's a journey. Like you're not just going to go home and implement IoT and then call it a day. It's a process, and so the cluster is serves as a vehicle for companies to keep coming back, get help with their problems, and help them on their journey. Yeah.
That was a good summation. Good job, Rick. She stole that from you. She did a good job.
I was lucky they gave me a seat. I thought I was just coming to
hang out, listen. No, yeah, we're gonna have you sit down.
I didn't know how technical the conversation was gonna get.
It's technical enough.
Anytime we start to get really technical, like Rick just lights up and. You can tell he's like so. He's in his.
No, all we need is to talk about cars, and we'd be all set.
Cars wasn't on my agenda. But
No.
The one other thing I really wanted to touch on was where you're seeing energy or renewable energy, or how you're seeing the Midwest adopt different flavors of renewable energy today. I know this is kind of something you guys touched on at some point, but then I think you guys looked at energy in general. So I guess if you could lead me through the beginning of what your initial ambitions were with your energy cluster, and then kind of what you're seeing in our region and how that stacks up with the rest of the world.
So from my experience,
yes,
I was peripheral to it. It really started with a focus on putting a smart grid in place in the Cleveland area. So that allowed us to look at things like data storage, a smart grid, how to do a better job of controls, how to do a better job of parsing out energy, that kind of thing. So that was supposed to be the beginning of it all. But now I think it's transitioned a little bit more. We have a pretty good presence when it comes to electric vehicles, and also for that matter the using those as a platform also to do data analytics and the information that's pulled from them to do a better job of traffic flow and things like that. So that's starting to come from it.
Okay.
And it'd be interesting to see. I know we're working with Tri-C to put together a roadmap for that, and it'd be interesting to see where it finally ends up.
No, it's Cleveland State University. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Cleveland State.
okay.
One
Yeah.
of those C's.
It happens.
I'm sorry, it's Cleveland State.
Yeah.
That document. So we actually, at the same time we started the Smart Manufacturing Roadmap, we started one for energy storage, and again, it was the same concept of bringing together those industry leaders to, start this process of just identifying, where are we at, where are we going, and then getting out and talking to those companies that have that important feedback to give. So Cleveland State University has been leading that study for us, and I think that they're going to be ready to release it hopefully soon, maybe within the next month or two. And that, again, it'll be, a roadmap that'll help lead the region forward. I just think from a TeamNEO perspective, in terms of our capacity, we have tapped on the shoulder of T-Bike, the Tech Belt Energy TBEIC.
EIC, right?
I was
TBEIC.
close.
Okay.
They're down in Warren, Ohio.
Okay.
So they're leading, when it comes to entrepreneurship and energy storage, they're leading that initiative. But we've partnered with them to kind of help lead this energy storage cluster forward, and we'll assist, but we don't have the expertise in house. So with our innovation cluster, Rick is our tech lead.
Yep.
But the gentleman, Bill Hagstrand, who led our energy storage cluster, he's since retired, and we've just realized that
you needed him.
well, we just no longer had the expertise in house or the
resource.
capacity.
Right.
So I unfortunately, when I came on board, they had stretched me between the 3 innovation clusters, and it's when you're doing all of the events, the marketing, the membership, the all of those activities that go into managing the programs for these clusters, it's a lot to have 3. Yeah. It's a lot to have 2, but
three's worse.
3, yeah.
I get and did that energy cluster again? I wasn't involved at all, so I only have peripheral. Is that more electricity focused, or like what kind of energy were you guys focusing on? Was it renewable?
Renewable.
Okay, that's what I kind of assumed.
And renewable energy. So again, they were talking about wind. They were talking specifically the initial focus, and I think it still is energy storage.
Yeah. So like solar panels and just different energy cells.
Yeah. So again, solar doesn't make sense unless you have an energy storage system for it. Same thing for wind. So that's why they were talking about that. And of course, we have NASA in our backyard. Yeah. They've been talking about energy storage forever on all the different technologies that are necessary for that. So that we were just bringing that all together.
And I don't know if people realize how big fuel cell is in Ohio. There's not a single fuel cell component that doesn't trace back to Ohio. So I mean, just the strengths and capabilities that we have in this region, might not be as well known,
but they're there.
But it's a definite, strength that we have in this region.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. So we are nearing the end. I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to plug anything you wanted to. I don't know if you have any events coming up, super short term, or even like longer term, because again, I do sit on these for a little bit before we push them out.
All right.
Yeah, we definitely have upcoming events. They're just, the dates are not set in stone. You can go to the 3D printing clusters website is neohioamcluster.org, and you can go to the events page and see what's listed there. For smart manufacturing, just go to TeamNEO.org. Stands for Team Northeast Ohio, and find our smart manufacturing page, and you can find my email address. I can get you on the newsletter. Reach out to Rick with questions if you are interested in. We talked about the readiness assessment, so we have one for both IoT and 3D printing. So if you're a manufacturer and you're just not sure, should you be exploring this topic? How do you get involved? You could take either of those readiness assessments and get your score. Or stay tuned for an upcoming event, and encourage everyone to attend.
Yeah,
sounds good for me.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that when it comes to the more technical questions,
I'll give everyone Rick's cell phone. Well, so this is getting at. Don't worry.
I always encourage people to get to know Rick and get in touch with him, because he's just a wealth of information. Just has a lot of knowledge, and so he's the guy to know.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, the reason why Rick's here is because I've known him for 4 3 years, somewhere
Yeah,
around there, maybe longer.
Right.
And I know that he has a technical acumen that is worth listening to. So I was very excited that he agreed to come on. So thank you, and thank you for bringing Melinda. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
You know, it was great. Thanks, guys.
All right.